All right. Hello, all, and welcome to ERPfixers July 2020 webcast. My name is Jess Carson, and I am your host with ERPfixers. Today, we have presenting Rogerio Faleros, and he's going to be discussing how to distribute costs during periods of irregular production activity. Just before we get into it today, I do want to go over some things. If you guys could please visit the bottom of your screen, that is where you will find the chat box. We do have a live Q&A at the end of this session, so if you could please send all of your questions through the chat box, and I will be able to ask Rogerio the questions at the end of the presentation. All right, guys, well, let's get started. So, Rogerio, if you want to, perfect, awesome, thank you. So, what is ERPfixers? We connect you with SAP experts to obtain quality immediate solutions through your SAP system. We consist of thousands of SAP freelancers globally in all SAP modules who are ready to help and assist with their knowledge in SAP. We offer online platform, SAP optimization assessment, material ledger, S/4HANA transitional roadmap, and cost transparency reports. If you'd like more information, please go to www.erpfixers.com. A little bit about Rogerio. He is an independent SAP consultant. He specializes in controlling functionality. He has been working with IFRS and integration with product costing material ledger, minimizing the impact of the changes in SAP for companies in different locations. He's the author of Configuring Controlling in SAP ERP, introducing the material ledger in SAP S/4HANA. So I'm going to go ahead and take it away and give it off to Rogerio. Thank you so much today, Rogerio, for joining us. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, ERPfixers, for the opportunity to share some ideas I have. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I know that it's, let's say, it's a strange situation where you have to spare 1 hour from your home to stay with me. So welcome to my place. This is the place where I work. I think most of the people work like this. And I wish that everybody's healthy and this over soon. So the idea of this, what I want to present today, it's a process that it's mainly, it happens a lot in agribusiness companies, where part of the cost they have happens when they don't have production. So they need to find a way that they could use this cost when production reach the peak, or let's say when they have some production to absorb the cost. And the idea here is to show how we can handle this in SAP in a way that it can run smoothly and working, that we don't need to do a lot of accruals and things like this, and face the issues that companies have. Okay. So this is mainly what I mentioned, that the idea, it's the first thought or idea was to work with this solution for agribusiness companies, and also any kind of companies that decisionality of the production happens. Let's say production happens in a way that the costs are not there. For example, factories that it spend part of the year closed just to do maintenance, and part of the year they are really production. They have production, and you need all this. Let's say 6 months that you have only maintenance. You need somehow to observe to the end product. Okay. Of course, now we have the situation of COVID-19 that also goes in the same way, because most of the companies we have to freeze or to stop what we are doing, but the cost is still happen, and we expect that our production and sales start to grow again. So we need to find a way or to split this cost we happen or we occurred in this period in a way that we could, let's say, absorb better in the product. So in SAP point of view, what we want to talk about is that the functionality we use to prove that works, or to show this work in SAP. So we use assessments, cost center assessments, use internal orders. Internal orders is the simple way, but it also works with WBS elements and PS. So it's not mandatory to have PS, but internal orders, yes. We use internal orders as investment measure. That means we move this cost from internal orders to asset under construction, balance sheet, and then we have a complete asset. We do depreciation and things like this. Of course, it's not the same way that you do assets or any company we do assets. We trick the system to get what we need. So we create different asset classes, different accounts, different depreciation accounts, different account groups, in a way that we can reflect the cost or the cost nature in the production process. Okay, and we use allocation structure to map these in the different settings. For example, OPEX cost, tax cost, depreciation, and things like this that we need to see in a different way in the P&L that will be converted to production later. So if we look to a graph, so mainly this is a situation where we have production. Let's say the company starts, we are talking here about 5 years. So imagine agribusiness, the company, they buy land. So in the first 2 years or 1 year, they need to prepare the land, so there is no production. But after the second year, the production starts really have, and then it reach the peak. And of course, the land go to a time that we need to redo the investment. So you have a peak and then it goes down again. But if we look to the cost curve, that is different, because to make it happen, the expense will really go high in the beginning of the process. That means we spend a lot of money to start producing, and when we really have production, we don't have that amount of cost anymore. Okay, so that's one situation that we are talking here that we need to let's say, to make it better or transparent. So the idea is, if we look, the costing is happening in the beginning, but production is happening in the middle. Okay, so we need to find a way to move the red curve to the production line. That means we can see what's happening, we can use our cost when we have absorption. Otherwise, we have really low cost for production, really high cost as expense or under over absorption in the both ways, in the beginning of the curve and the end of the curve. And what it's more interesting is that this process is not only one time. So let's say at the end of the first year, you also need investment that will follow for the next 5 years and so on. So the cost will, or the production will also follow this way. So every year you have different production, or the production will happen always in the same period and just a short time of the period. So with this process, we continue to do until you have production, or still your company is working, okay? And if we look at the cost, it also happens in the same way. So every year we have more cost, and a different behavior than the production process. So the goal here is what? Is that we have this similar, okay? And to do it similar, we need to find a way to turn the red side similar to the blue side. So what we do, we change, or we move the allocation of the cost to the different period. Even if it happens, you pay the cost in the moment it happens, but we reserve the cost for the moment you have production, okay? And we use, we are using a lot of a phrase that it's happening at this moment of COVID. So what we have to do is to flatten the curve. So we need to bring the cost to the same period of production, okay? And in this moment, the idea we have here to present to you is that we are producing tomato. Okay, so we'll explain the idea in Excel, and then we go to SAP to show in SAP what can be done, and also real life demo of this tomato production. Okay. Perfect. So there we go. So imagine the situation here. We have several periods of cost happening. Okay. And this is the beginning of my process. Let's say my company just bought the land. So now I need to prepare the land to produce my tomato in the future. Okay. So what I use here, all the cost that happens here in this moment, let's say salaries, any component activities, external activities, new plants I used, and things like this. I transfer this cost to an asset under construction called formation, planting, okay? So every cost that happens in this phase or the pre-phase that I don't have production, I reserve in the balance sheet until I start have production. Okay, so let's say the first two columns here in the A here, I'm saying every cost that occurs in this moment, I'm reserving. Okay, so I don't have expense, I don't have production to observe because it's a new land. So everything that happens here, I'm reserving for to be exhausted in the future. After this period, I start to have production, and this line, this column here, it's called production. So if I look here, the two first cost center, I transferred to balance sheet, and I have a balance of 29,000 in the balance sheet to be depreciated in the time that I need. So in this moment, I have internal order of 29,000. I moved this to asset and construction, so now it's in the balance sheet. And in a moment later, I start to have my production. And again, production, I still have my salaries going to the cost center. That's now it's called cut. I still have raw materials, accrual. And what happens now? I start to do amortization of the cost that I record in the beginning. Okay, so from my 29,000 now, I did amortization of 15,000, and then I show this as amortization in this process here. If we go back here, and then when I mentioned to you that our process repeats, okay, it also happened in the middle of the production process that we have also to do some treatment or some cost that will happen that we also spread in different periods. So we do a small cycle to reserve this money. Okay, so we have the big part, and now let's say the big investment that lasts for 5 years. And every year I need to do a small investment to continue producing in the same way. So the big one will depreciate, let's say in a period of 5 years. So I have one internal order, one asset that will last for 5 years. And the shorter one, that it's the expense that you have in this current year that you also need to depreciate in the current year. For example, if you have 6 months the factory works, 6 months it doesn't work. So the 6 month cost you have there, you have to expense this in the following 6 months. So that's the continuous investment, or for example, treatment of scrap. So again, I turn this to asset. If you see here 5,000, and I also do amortization of 3,000 of this cost. Okay, so the remaining balance in here, let's say 14,000 and 2,000, I just move to the next period when I have production again, and so on. So if the process continue like this, I have a production again, and then the peak of production will happen the next year. I still have reserves to be depreciated or exhausted in the following month. Okay, so if we apply or we take this model to what it's happened today, for example, the COVID, that would be the COVID part. Let's say we still have the cost, but we have no production. Okay, so I would make a process to save this cost, to move this to the balance sheet and release this when production starts again. Okay, so then you have a clear picture of absorption of cost and things like that. Good, okay. So now let's translate this to SAP words. Okay, so the technical part I mentioned, the cost happening not in the same period of the production. And now let's do a small model in SAP that you can see this working. Okay, so what I will do, I'll go and show the customizing from SAP, and then we will go in SAP to do video a live demo. Okay, so what do we use in SAP? We use in SAP controlling assessments from cost center, internal order. We use assets. Of course, we use production order. And everybody knows that material ledger, it's I call my baby. I'm also showing material ledger here. Okay, so you don't need to have material ledger, but of course it's advantage if you have, because you can have all the cost track and things like this. But we leave material ledger for another session. This one we talk only about this. So what we use, why we we do assessments, okay? Because if we look the first part of the cost, when we start to have cost, I need somehow to move this cost from my P&L and send back to the balance sheet. And the technology to do this is the assessment. We take one assessment cycle, we take all this cost from the cost centers, we move this to internal order, and this internal order, when we settle the internal order, it moves to the asset construction and clears my P&L, okay? So the technology behind it's assessment and internal order settlement. And why we use allocation structure? Because if you're familiar with the internal orders and also how the internal order works, you know, when we do the settlement, we can choose one account or several accounts. And I want to keep the nature of the cost from the source. So if I have salaries, I want to have a allocation account for salaries. If I have OPEX, I want to have one allocation account for OPEX. If I have depreciation, I want to have one allocation account for depreciation. Why I want to have this? Because if I want to build my P&L later, I want to have my cash flow, and I want to remove my depreciation, for example. I want to see my personal cost, I want to see my OPEX cost, my machine cost. I can still do that. So the idea is that with the allocation structure is that we keep the source of the cost, or the type or nature of the cost, in the receiver, and when we release this cost, we release in the same way. So that's the reason I use allocation structure, okay? And also another functionality in the asset model. So if I look to the allocation structure, this model here created only two, okay? That means personal cost, so I called Z1, agribusiness allocation. So I create one called personal cost and another one called OPEX. And I like to do by group. Let's say the sender accounts I want to have by group, in a way that I can always maintain in production. If I want to add or remove a new account, I don't need to do customize. I just use this group, and this group is going to be the source for the costs that I want to allocate. Okay, so in this case here, I created one for personal cost, another one for OPEX cost. Why? Because I want to make it simple to show to you a real case. Otherwise, we would spend here a project. Okay, so the source I did by group. And then, so from the assessment point of view, I would say this is what we need. Of course, the creation of the assessment cycle, it's a step that it's master data. Okay, then we show later. But now the customized for assessment, it's this one, and of course we need to define one account for assessment for PEX and one account for assessment for OPEX. Okay, so that's the simple customize we do in the assessment point of view. The good part, or the rock and roll, it's in the internal orders, where we really stress the use of internal orders. Because internal orders, everybody knows the use of internal orders, and people will say, we can use it for marketing, we can use for accruals, we can use for different purposes. But we can also use for asset and construction, and we can create several assets with the same internal orders and things like this. So the idea is that we stress the customize of the internal orders, and then explain to you how this can be done or how we can achieve this. Okay? So the first thing, where we go again, to the source structure. Why I'm talking about source structure here in internal order? Because the source structure will allow me, when I have my asset and construction, to create the number of assets based on the number of allocations or source structures I have. So let's say I have one for personal cost, another one for OPEX cost. When I open and I do the customize in the way that I want to view this, when I open my internal order from my asset and construction from the internal order, SAP will automatically propose two assets, one for PEX, another one for OPEX. And imagine if I also have another line for depreciation, another line for anything you want. So if I have 4 lines of allocation structures, SAP would create 4 asset and construction based one in each nature. So imagine you're now saying how much reserves I have in salary in my balance sheet and the depreciation of salaries, how much reserves I have as machine, And also it's the OPEX cost late, how much reserves I have from depreciation, how much I release as the depreciation. So it depends what you want. Okay, so we create how many lines in the source structure as you need, as you define to your cost breakdown. Okay, just going to what we have in S4, just to remember, if you use, of course, everybody use material ledger and you use actual cost component split, we have the possibility now in 1909 to have 120 cost components. So I would say if we stay with only 2 here, imagine it's not nice. So if we go for this solution, of course, the discussion will expand the possibilities and how many, let's say, cost nature we want to show, or in the balance sheet or in the P&L when we release this cost. Okay, so the source structure, it's used to this because we will map later in the customizing this source structure to an asset class and also asset of construction that this will create what we need. So mainly this is the transaction we use. I could put this one to here. Also, I do by cost element group. I always do by group because it makes life easier later. Okay, and then we go to continue to the allocation structure. So this allocation structure, now I go to the allocation structure. Sorry, I was in the search structure, now I'm going to allocation structure. Allocation structure, I have to tell SAP again where I want to allocate the cost. So if I want to have the source of, for example, personal cost and also OPEX cost, where I want this cost to be allocated. In this case, I said I can move from one order to another order, or I can move this to a fixed asset. Okay, and everybody knows when I have expenses in the internal order or expenses in the P&L, and I want this to move to the balance sheet, I need to credit this cost in a P&L account. Okay, and for this process here, we create one account and then cost element, a category 22. That means you can move settlement, it will touch P&L in your P&L, really account, and that will move to the balance sheet in the asset of construction. So it's a must to have this if you use the internal order as investor measure as well. So we are really in the beginning of the customize. We are not even in the internal order. I'm just saying how I want to move the cost from A to B or in a different cost nature. Okay, so this is the transaction we use to customize. Mainly, I tell the receiver category and what you want, what I want to do. In this case here, if I want, for example, to do to the WS, I have also to define here which account should be the driver to move the cost to the WS element. Okay, so we talked about search structure to explain that we open the asset of construction in how many lines I have in my search structure. Then the allocation structure is to tell where and how I want my cost to be allocated, which is going to be the account that I will drive this to the balance sheet, okay? The next one is the settlement profile, where I will define which receiver I want this will be valid, and I will also define in the settlement profile here what's going for this settlement profile, which is going to be the allocation structure and the search structure that we just defined, because this one later is going to be in the order type. Okay, that's the next point. So in this case here, what I said to SAP is, okay, this one, that's investment order. I said I can set it to a GL account. I can set it to a cost center. I can set it to an order, WS, and fixed asset. The problem here, if I do this customizing and I don't also say here how I want this to be allocated, that will fail. So the number of receiver side here must match to the number of receivers you have here, because SAP will tell which account you want me to allocate to the receiver you are mapping over there. So if I'm saying, if I just add here one balance sheet account that I want just to put the value there, that will fail because I don't have one account for the settlement. Okay, so be careful when you define what is the value receivers for your internal order and what you have in your allocation structure as settlement allocation. This must match. Okay, in this case here, you see that's not matching. Then if I choose account, of course, it will go wrong. Okay, so now where we go to the asset and construction. So we create an asset and construction class, okay, that will hold the idea or the one that I want to use in my investment order. Okay, so it's a simple asset class with what we do here, or if it's a investment measure, we need to tick it here that I can use in the investment order. We define the account determination, so that means which balance sheet account it will go. Remember, this is the asset of construction, so there is no depreciation in this asset. So what you have there, it's just the reserves of the cost. So you choose in the account determination, define which account you want to touch the balance sheet. Okay, so there is no depreciation for the asset of construction. So we create this class for the asset construction. And then we create the investment profile. So see, we are doing one by one and one linking to the other one, okay? So what I did here, look, I create my investment profile and then I tell, I want to have the AUC, the asset and construction. And if you look here, this flag, it's saying, the asset and construction I want to base on my source structure. Okay, so that means for each search structure I have, I could have different asset class or different assets created. Okay, so this is the trick part if you want to split the cost in different natures. So you create the number of assets, the asset and construction that you need for each nature. Okay. And then you can choose between line item summary. So line item, you have to define for each line where you want to go. Summary, of course, is the total of the so the trick part here, it's this asset and construction per source structure. Okay. In the live demo, we will show that. And here is where I tell to SAP, look, remember we create the search structure, the first thing we created, and I tell to SAP, look, the first one that I called personal cost, you go to one asset class. The second one, you can go to the same asset class or to a different one. If it's the same asset class, SAP will create two assets in the same asset class. If I have more lines in my search structure, SAP will create the number of lines you have there. So it's really powerful if you want to split like this. It's not very used, but if you see, you can do a lot. Okay, you can really treat the settlement of the internal order in a different asset and construction. So what we do here to use as reference always, I always suggest to create these model orders because these we plug to the order type. And that means every time I create a new internal order, SAP will use this one as reference. So what I do, I create an order that's going to be a model. And then in the investment part, I set here what's going to be the investment profile. What's the benefit of having this? You can predefine fields that you want to have already. Okay, so that's the beauty part of the order model. When I create, SAP will get all the information I have in this order model and will create my asset, my internal order based on this model. So it's really nice. I like this one. And then at the end, we define what's going to be my order type. Okay, so the order type will collect all the customizing that we did prior to this. So I'm saying the settlement profile is Z1, and the Z1 I have the allocation structure, the source structure, and then I have the asset class, and I have the investment measure, the investment profile that it's also in the order model. So the order type, what I did, I just put everything in the same place. So I don't need to always, when I have a master data, to keep changing things to make it work. No, I just do the customizing correct in the order type. And when I create this order type, SAP will just adapt and adopt and use what it's here. Okay, now we go to asset class and depreciation. This is also a really nice part. So you see that we are moving from controlling, then we start from CCA, cost center account, and then we went to internal orders. We spoke a little bit for investment orders. Now I'm going to asset class. And why I'm talking about asset class? Because when I finish this investment or this asset under construction, I need to transfer this balance to the complete asset, the one that's going to depreciate in a period that I predefined. Let's say it can be in 5 years, it can be 3 years, 2 years, 6 months, and 9 months, and things like this. So that's the tricky part where we define how we want to release our cost that it's there to defer. Okay, so I created two account determination, sorry, one for tax, another one for OPEX. Why? Because the complete asset, when I run the depreciation, I want one line to touch tax account, and another line I want to touch OPEX account. So, and then it's the way to do this, it's doing the account determination. So what I did, I created also one asset class that I link to this account determination. So I have one asset class personal cost, one asset class for OPEX cost. By doing this, I make sure that my balance sheet in the let's say in the cost that I'm saving there, that I'm just holding this cost there. I have one line for personal cost, one line for OPEX cost. And when I depreciate, it also goes in the same way, cumulative depreciation, things like this. So it's a safe way to have the balance sheet open by nature. Of course, you can get this, for example, if you take the project and then you split the cost in the internal order in the cost center, you can also have this. But this way it's there. And now in S4, that everything happens in one big table. So if you have this granularity already, when you have the posting, you don't need to run any auxiliary report to get this information. So I always suggest spend more time doing opening how many asset class or how many accounts you need, and later you get the benefit of doing this. So this part here of the, I will not spend a lot of time here, but this part here, when we have the valuation of the depreciation, how we want to depreciate, that's the trick part that we can reach that curve, okay? Because I'm saying here in this valuation method here, in multi-level method, I'm saying for the first year of the value that I have in my complete asset, I want depreciation of 10%. For the second year, I want 25%. For the third year, I want 30%. And for the fourth and fifth year, I want that to reduce again. So it made the curve, okay? So that's the trick part. If I just keep linear, SAP would depreciate 5 years equally. Then I'll work with it, it's useless, because if it's going to depreciate in the same linear process, we have the cost. Again, high cost when I don't have production and low cost when I have production. So the idea here for each company, for each business, that you understand and you can split this calculation method in a way that follows your business. So in the case of the tomato, I said, okay, 10% of my cost I want to do in the first year, then 25, 30, 25, and 10. Okay, and then of course you can open this even more if the investment it's more than 5 years. So the idea is that you play with the percentage, what you want to release by year. So, and let's say if you have one investment or order that it's for 1 year, then you can play with months. So it's this key here, let's say this is the key to do the depreciation in the way I said, different values for different periods and different years. So that means flatten the curve. Okay, and then I define here the depreciation key that I want to use in my class. Okay, so that's, let's say, if I have to highlight, this is where I can touch the curve in a way to have the cost opened. And here's where I tell what's going to be the default for my class. So this is the PAX. I'm saying for PAX, you use the depreciation key called Z001, use this layout, and they use for life of 5 years. Okay, this is predefined. What it's important here that remember that I showed to you the allocation structure and what can be the receivers. In this case here, it's also so you can activate and deactivate the asset class for some depreciation areas. Okay, but remember, for example, if you have IFRS, US GAAP, or local GAAP, something that this cannot be done in the local GAAP, then of course this process is not valid. So you can deactivate this to the specific ledger you're touching. The problem here, always compare what you have as a final or the asset class you have here for the complete asset. You have to have the same definition for the asset on the construction. Because when you go to transfer the asset on construction to the final asset, to the complete asset, SAP checks if the number of source depreciation areas are the same of the receiving depreciation areas. Okay, so it's tricky to look this one here. Check the class for asset and construction, see if it matches with the complete asset you're dealing. Okay, because then you can transfer the value later. So that's the point from the asset and construction. So what I'm going to do now, let's go to a live demo. Live demo, I mean, I create some examples. I will show in SAP the examples to you. And then you see this happening in the finance, this happening in the cost, this happening in production. See how the internal order will behave and things like that. Okay. Stop. Okay, you should see now my SAP, my test SAP. Okay, so the first thing I did, I created one. So in my process, I created one. This is my company code, USA. Then I created one group that I called Agri, okay, from agribusiness. And open here, I have 4 cost centers, okay? One is the plantation, another one is the treatment, another one is the cut, and another one is the is it shared? I think so, yeah. So I open here the group of the cost centers in a way that I can see 4 cost centers based on the spreadsheet we have. Let's see here, I have some. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Martin. So we have now here 4 cost centers. I want to replicate what I gave in the spreadsheet, you know. So what I do here, if I look to the cost in this cost center, so let's take the first one. So I'll do month 1 to 3. In the cost center group, see here that I created one only for this moment, that it's the 2,500. So I use only the 2,500, okay? Then I execute. So the upper part here, okay, it's my cost center. So let's say the plantation, I have what? Maintenance cost, direct posting. I have external material, external procurement, and salaries and wages. Okay, the same thing happened to the second one. I also have cost, direct cost, in different months. So if I go here and I do a double click and I say, I want to see the period breakdown here. So you can see that this cost center received different costs in different periods. So January, February, March. The same thing from the other cost center, okay? Now, what I did, I created one assessment cycle. First, I create one internal order. So this is what I want to show to you. So we have now the internal order. When I create the internal order, I go to the internal order. That's the internal order for asset and construction, the one I just did and created all the definition there. Okay. And as I mentioned to you, as I like to use the order model, it brings even the name that I said there. Let's say test 3. Okay. If I look here to the investment, it brought already my investment profile that I said what I want to have. Okay. So I will define here my profit center, this one. And this is what I want to show from the investment order that I have my investment profile and all the customizes right in the right place. If I go here to extras and I say, create my asset and construction, as I said to SAP, create one asset for each group I have, SAP just proposed 2 assets for me. Okay, one for PEX, another one for OPEX. So it's really important that you really stress with your company how you want to open the cost. Because if you have here also another one that's called depreciation or tax or things like these ways, you could open, and then SAP would open 2 or 3 or 4 different assets for you. Okay, so if I go here, I can go there and change the name. Let's say tax. The other one, I came back, and I say the other one, it's OPEX. This asset here, it's the asset on construction, and these 2 here will not depreciate. This will only have the balance sheet account when I move from an asset that is under construction to the complete asset. Okay, good. So I will just show the one I created prior to this one. So let's say you create an order for the each year or for the period you are, okay? And this one here in the settlement rule, you can see that SAP created for me the first 2, that was the one we said for the investment under asset and construction. And when I go here to the other key that is create the complete asset, SAP also creates 2 assets, okay? And then in the 2 assets you define, I want one, for example, for PEX, another one for OPEX. These 2 assets here are my complete asset, okay? So you see here that I have 2 pairs, one pair for the asset construction, another one pair for the complete asset. And this will increase the number of assets or service structures you want. Okay, you see that SAP respected here my structure, the one I said 10 and 20, tax and OPEX. And this comes by default. You don't need to go there and insert. No, when you create, it goes there and puts there for you. The only definition you have to give here, it's for the complete asset, which one is going to be the asset class, of course, because you don't have this definition where you have to do it. That's manually, okay? So the other thing I did was, so then I created my my cycle with 2 segments, okay? The first segment, I'm using, of course, the allocation that I created, saying, if it's personal cost, I'm saying send everything that you see that specs cost to this internal order, okay? To this internal order. My allocation structure is saying which account I should go, I should move, okay? So I'm saying do the assessment. When it's specs cost, use this account. When it's OPEX cost, use the other account. But this definition is here, so I don't need to tell SAP which account I want to use, okay? Because I'm saying OPEX and PEX, and then SAP will define this. When I run it, so what will happen? So when I run the assessment, you see that I have one account for OPEX, another account for OPEX, because I have this definition in my allocation structure, saying OPEX will take 18,000, that's fine, see, 3 plus 15, that's my group of OPEX, and the personal cost will take 3,600, that's what it's here, okay? Then also what it's in the other cost center. So if I take the two cost centers, I have the total that it's my reserve. Okay. Now, what happens if I go also and check the balance of this internal order? So I also see that I received this cost from the cost center. Okay, that's the second step that I will explain right now. So I received this cost from my cost center. So my cost center now, I just cleaned. So there is no cost there anymore. Of course, in a real case, you leave some cost there. So saying my base for the assessment can tell 20% of the cost stays in the cost center. And I just moved 8% to the balance sheet. Okay, you can always play with the allocation and the assessment. So what I do now, just after we do the, so I settle the order, I know which, so let's see here. 003. Let's take the order again. Then let's take the settlement rule. And the first thing I want to check is this asset and construction, okay? So we go to W01 file. I'm going to go 2000 and then here it's there. So why it's 0 here? Because I did the transfer already, so I transferred it to the final asset, okay? But if I click here, I can see the what SAP is doing. So I see the clearing account for the P&L that I mentioned to you, and my balance sheet account for both, okay? Now, if I check the other asset from my internal order, that's my complete asset. So when I run it, and I check also the asset balance, this is after the transfer. So if I check my complete asset now, I see how much it received, okay? And now I start to have some posted values. Why I have posted values? Because this asset here depreciates, okay? Then I did depreciation for month 7. And now if I check here and I go to comparison, I see that it is respecting exactly the percentage I gave, okay? So it starts low, it goes a little bit up, 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 and low again. Good, good. So let's say next year, the cost will be higher than the first year. The other one will be higher, and then it start to go down again. So it's what I mentioned to you. You play with the percentage what you want to have in the period, okay? And now if I go back to my cost center, oops. This one here. Now I go back to the cost center. I did run the depreciation already. Remember that I mentioned to you. So if I check this, so the cut is my production cost center, okay? Now I have the two depreciation packs and depreciation OPEX, okay? So why did it happen? Now, every time I run depreciation, next month SAP will release the cost and we release the cost. So if you make this process to be continuous, that will happen always, okay? So we always have a portion of the cost that you just held in your balance sheet, okay? That's what's stored there. I also created one production order so we could see this there. And get the production number here. So that's my order. So it's tomato, and then I can get here cost analysis. Then I see that it went to the confirmations, to the finished good tomato, and also I have one component that I put as sugar. Okay. The nice part here, if you're now in S4 and use material ledger, is that you see this also in CQM3. So imagine in a world that you have agribusiness, usually they really want to track the small portion of cost. So this cost component split can be really big. So imagine if you have each activity in a way that you can drive the activity to the correct place. In this case, I have material, then I have machine and labor. Okay, so if I have different allocation, different active types, I could enhance this report. Okay. So mainly, we could now, in a way to show in this, that we could flatten the curve and bring the cost to the moment it really happened, okay? And then you might say, Rogerio, now it rained a lot and my production did not follow this. So in this moment, what you do, you just do unplanned depreciation. And then or you save more or you release more, or if the production is higher. And then you see that the end of the period, the investment you have for 5 years now, it's only for 4 years, you accelerate the depreciation. So you can always play with this asset, because this asset, it's what you're going to release or not for your P&L. Okay, so this is, in the presentation, I'm showing exactly what we did here with the live demo. The asset being transferred, going to the balance sheet, what we have as a fixed asset, the two assets, the depreciation, planned depreciation, the comparison in the years, and all the reporting we have here. Also the production order that we just discussed, and also the material ledger view. Okay, so now what we did, we just did that. Okay, by using SAP to do to move the cost to the correct period. You may say, we do this, of course. I mean, the company will not waste money like this or not observe the correct way. But most probably, the manual control you have here, like a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of accruals account, control. If you move this to the system, then you have people free to think in another solution. So that's the reason we move this to SAP. Okay, I will hand it back to Jessica. So thank you, everybody. Now we are open to, so at the end, I have my tomato with a good cost and a correct cost.
Thank you so much, Rogerio. We really appreciate you being here with us today. As a reminder, in case for those of you who missed the introduction, we will be posting a recording of this session as well as the questions and answers to those questions. So yeah, let's get into the Q&A. So we've got a couple over here. Let me start with the first one we got. It's from Ashish. Hi, Ashish, welcome back. Can you explain whether cumulative actual activity price option in OKEQ is advantageous to handle the fluctuations in fixed costs over several months as against periodic actual activity price?
Can you repeat, please?
Sure. So can you explain whether cumulative actual activity price option in OKEQ is advantageous to handle the fluctuations in fixed costs over several months as against periodic actual activity price?
The difference here is the credit will happen in 1 month only, okay, with the actual activity and cumulate activity type. So you always read the past, accumulate, and then you credit. Of course, if you go 1 to 5, then this is net to 0. But the idea is that we follow month by month what's going on. So we increase the activity rate, or increase the value of the cost to the moment that I have production. If I use actual activity rate, I agree with you. If we just analyze 6 months, that would create one activity rate for the 6 months. But you would have here a higher credit in the month that the costs are higher or lower, or the production are lower. So that's the reason. This one here, you can really play with the cost to the amount of production you have.
To spin off that, Ashish asked, can one use cumulative actual activity price for a specific activity, say fixed costs, and still be able to use periodic actual activity price for some other activity type, say for variable costs? Where is this set up?
I have to check, Ashish, but I think it's in the version. I think that this is in the version. I don't know if we can have one with cumulative, another one with periodic, but I think this is stored in the version customized. But I'll check and answer to you.
Okay, great. Yeah, and for those of you, just so you know, we will have the answers. We'll go through this again if we need to. So Anil, and if I said your name wrong, I apologize. They asked, rather than using asset under construction, why can we not use direct final asset in this case?
Controlling. I mean, you have more control using investment orders, because if you do, you always need, if you use the final asset, you can settle the order there again. But if you want to put a budget, consider another functionalities in the investment order, it's easier. I mean, it's really controlling. You have a credit and debit. You can see what's happened there and where it's going.
His next question is, you are capitalizing the expenses of one period and creating an asset, and subsequently you are depreciating it. So capitalizing the cost, is it not violating any financial accounting rules?
It's what I mentioned to you. There are accounting rules that you can do this, and accounting rules that you cannot do this. So it's important that you check with which accounting rules your company or you are respecting now, that you could do it. Okay, that's the reason I showed different layers of depreciation areas, one for FRS, another one. Now, of course, it will break a rule for one accounting rule. But for example, you have accounting rules that you just report yearly basis. So then it's not violating, because you expense and you have the cost and expense in a period. And also for different kind of business, you can also have exception in the accounting rules. Exception meaning is not that you can do, but it's saying that, look, for this specific one, I know that the investment in land, then I can just capitalize in a different way.
Okay, so we have time for, I'd say, one more question. How is your company handling COVID-19 downtime, production, and costs?
Yeah, that's a good question. Most of the companies, they are not saving these. You know, what I see, they use the government benefits to let's say, to reduce this kind of expenses. But they are not using this method, let's say in Excel or even in SAP, to have this approach. So it's let's say you have a big under absorption cost in your cost center because you don't have production. So this cost stays there.
Awesome. Well, that is all the time we have, guys. We don't want to keep you any longer. Once again, we highly appreciate you spending your day with us. Please join us next time in August for our August 2020 webcast for ERPfixers. And once again, please visit www.ERPfixers.com for more information. Thank you so much, Rogerio. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, everybody, for your time today.
All right.
Bye.